One thing that the human brain is really good at doing is getting confused. Now, the thing with that is it makes the gameplay experience much more immersive and mind-numbing. With VR, you're no longer watching a game, you're in a game.
Video games have always offered fantastical possibilities. Come home from a long day at work and transport yourself into a different world. Whether that's a far-off land populated by dragons and griffins, the distant forgotten past, or in a spaceship headed to explore the vast unknown. Virtual reality offers us a new way to live out our fantasies, the ability to be an active part in the impossible and the terrifying. VR companies like Sony, currently working on games for their upcoming PSVR headset, are largely focusing on experiences that we can't or are too afraid to live through.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Hi.
Brynley Gibson, executive producer for Sony's VR World London, created Ocean's Descent, a game where you're lowered in a cage to the depths of the ocean.
We want you to be transported to a different world. Remember, it's 360 degrees, you can look all around you.
That is incredible. Oh my God. Great white shark has just swum past me and shook the cage. I want to keep my eyes on it because it's freaking me out. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Fuck that, literally, fuck that. That is so scary.
You get emotions when you're playing games or watching TV, but because you're in the world in VR, it is all around you. Anything we do, the emotions are heightened, so really simplistic things become exciting.
Immersion is a key part of VR's appeal, and it's what makes horror such a good fit for the platform. It's an opinion held by VR developers too, like Ryan Bousfield, developer of psychological horror game A Chair in a Room.
It kind of just came together initially as a quick demo, some quite a simple idea, just putting people in VR and creeping them out. I think VR horror is really interesting, and I think it's a really interesting starting point for VR because you can create tension, you can create that sense of fear and dread quite quickly and provoke a real reaction from people.
Do you feel like, as a games producer, there's a responsibility not to just completely traumatise all the users that view a game?
There's definitely a kind of balance and a kind of responsibility as a designer not to push people too far too quickly, because it could be, negative overall on people's experiences.
New levels of immersion with VR raise new levels of concern for users' physical and psychological conditions. Developers and consumers alike highlight warnings such as undiagnosed heart conditions, asthma, and sensitivity to adrenaline, posing a very real risk. Professor and founder of video games research firm Superdata, Joost van Drienen, offered us his insight for the potential risks as well as positives for VR gaming on our minds and bodies.
People are essentially guided by the impulses from their environment. And so there's this sense of danger attached to it, and sort of opens people up. It sort of opens the pores of your emotional being, saying, what's happening? It's like you become very, very alert, your adrenaline starts pumping. But there is a lot going on in terms of how you feel inside that space. Things like, a dissociative experience where you lose a sense of where you are in space, where your body doesn't feel like it's yours anymore. What VR allows to do is to go through, step by step, some really dramatically emotional moments. And there's experiments on this already where they're trying to rehabilitate soldiers with PTSD. But the way that they do is they slowly introduce them to these stressful situations and then sort of under the, of course, guidance of a therapist, allow them to kind of come to terms with these moments that have been so impactful in their life. So there's a spectrum of possibilities in terms of its immersive nature allowing an output or an end result that's either terrifying and horrible or fantastically positive and helpful.
Yet as VR becomes widely available and set to enter the homes of thousands, the studies are really just beginning for everyday gamers. Understanding the very real physical risks of VR is a present challenge for game developers. For game designer Mike Bithell, intense reactions in VR experiences raise new questions on the ethics of game design. In short, on how not to scare users to death.
Do you not feel a lot of responsibility?
Oh, there is. I mean, that stuff's coming up more and more. I was talking to someone the other day who's making a horror VR game which actively tries to work out what scares you and makes that happen more. And I kind of was talking to this person. I was like, that seems ethically like an interesting thing, because you're creating a torture device.
Yeah.
It's an entertaining torture device, but you're making something that's designed to upset people. And, you know, obviously, he pointed out horror movies. It's like, yep, that's, you know, there's clearly an audience for that. So yes, we're going to hit these really interesting kind of ethical dilemmas of like, what do we do? How far can we push things? How do these experiences affect people? And what influences do they have on people?
Entering a virtual world offers challenges for both our minds and bodies, but the slightest miscalculation in gameplay design can cause severe physical reactions in players. Rebellion founder and games veteran Jason Kingsley knows all about these challenges, from rebooting Atari's classic Battlezone for VR.
One of the things we started out to begin with was we did an undulating landscape. We did a sort of natural rolling landscape, and that was a big mistake. We had to get rid of that very quickly, because what that effectively meant was it felt like being on the surface of the sea. We effectively generated a seasick simulator. When you're in that tank, when you're surrounded by it, when you're looking around, as you'll experience, it's actually really quite overwhelming already. So dialing it down was a really interesting area. And we didn't know that when we first started. So we kind of had to adjust that on the fly.
Motion sensors, head tracking, and high frame rates all help to build the illusion that what we're seeing in those headsets is reality.
What's interesting about virtual reality then from a content creative perspective is that people have a real response in terms of heart rate. There's an adrenaline rush that follows. You know, if you really feel like you're falling, your body responds to it. You're tricking your body into it. VR sickness or cyber sickness is essentially sort of a dissociation between what your mind thinks is happening and what's actually happening to you physically. Your body and your mind, they're not going at the same pace. They're sort of just, and that creates a sense of nausea, right? And that's what a lot of companies are working on today, saying, how do we reduce motion sickness in VR? Or for decades, they've been working on that. And the big thing that they always came back to was, we can't solve this cyber sickness issue. You always have to consider that technology evolves faster than humans. And so here we are again, physiologically sort of falling behind on this tremendous technology.
We're through a frontier, we're through a looking glass at the moment. We are now stepping into the screen and into the computer. And that brings with it all sorts of issues, both wonderful opportunities and potentially bad places. As consumers and as creators, we've just got to be aware of that, and we've got to navigate that dangerous, potentially dangerous water.